Welcome to meeting number 8 of the Standing Committee on International Trade. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 18, 2025, the committee is resuming its study of Canada and the forthcoming CUSMA review. We have with us today as an individual Joshua Meltzer, Senior Fellow by video conference, and from the Canadian Automobile Dealers Association, Tim Roos, President and Chief Executive Officer, and New Williams, National Spokesperson, both people that the committee has seen before, so welcome here. And from the Mississauga Board of Trade, Trevor McPherson, President and Chief Executive Officer. So welcome to all of you today. We will start with opening remarks, followed by rounds of questions. You each have up to 5 minutes. Mr. Meltzer, I invite you to go forward, and we'll give you the 5 minutes first.
Pleasure. Thank you. It's great to be here. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. Joshua Meltzer, Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C.
Can you turn Mr. Meltzer, could you turn the volume up?
Yeah, sure. And lead of the USMCA initiative. Is that better? Great. My testimony today is going to focus on the issue of China's circumvention of...
Meltzer, I don't want to take away from your time here till we... Do you have any volume that you could raise? Yeah, I've got it on high here.
Is that better? Is that better? Is that an improvement?
It's an improvement, but not a whole lot.
Technically, the room's been having volume sounds problems today.
Is that any better?
Use the earpiece. That's the best
Okay, so everybody will have to be using the earpiece today. Okay, Mr. Meltzer, would you like to start again?
Yeah. My testimony today focuses on the issue of China's circumvention of U.S. trade and investment restrictions by entering the U.S. market via Canada. Chinese circumvention can also obviously happen via Canada, but today I will focus on Canada. Via Mexico, but I'll focus on Canada. Now, the issue of Chinese circumvention has already become an issue in US-Canada trade relations, and Canada has taken steps to address the issue, acknowledging that it is happening or seeking to prevent it from happening. Finding a more comprehensive approach to addressing Chinese circumvention will be a critical part of a successful USMCA joint review. The incentive for circumvention is straightforward. It is created by US tariffs on Chinese imports being higher than the same Canadian tariff on Chinese imports. Since 2018, the US has been raising tariffs on Chinese imports and further restricting Chinese investment into the US. At the end of 2024, average US tariffs on Chinese imports were 11%, and tariffs faced by Canadian products that were USMCA compliant was 0%, and the US average WTO MFN rate was around 0.15%. And these tariff differentials already created incentives for Chinese products to circumvent US tariffs via Canada, and the incentive for circumvention has grown. Today, the US trade-weighted tariff on Chinese imports is 43%, and the trade-weighted US tariff on Canadian imports is around 10%. The net result is that the incentive for Chinese circumvention will persist with respect to Canada, and in the event of better outcomes from the USMCA review where US tariffs on Canadian imports are lowered, then the incentive for circumvention will only increase. The incentive for circumvention will also result in goods entering Canada from China via third countries, often in Southeast Asia. As a result, addressing the challenge of circumvention may not be limited to tariff rates on imports from China alone. Before proceeding, I want to quickly define what I mean by circumvention, which encompasses 3 ways that Chinese products can enter the Canadian market. One way is transshipment, which occurs when an import from China passes through Canada on its way to the US without any substantial transformation that would allow it to be classified as being made in Canada. A second way is Chinese products can circumvent tariffs is by being incorporated into manufacturing and other processes in Canada, effectively an input into supply chains to produce a good which is then exported to the US. And a third way is via Chinese direct investment into Canada that produces products for export to the US. Now, Chinese goods transship via Canada into the US and that do not undergo sufficient transformation required to qualify under USMCA, yet claim the lower USMCA tariff, or are classified as made in Canada and then claim the lower US MFN rate, are inconsistent with Canada's trade obligations. However, the other opportunities for China's circumvention via supply chains and investment are often not a matter of legality. Instead, the concern with circumvention via these other pathways reflects changed political tolerance in the US for ongoing exposure to trade with China. So how to better address the incentives to circumvention created by Europe tariffs on China is often less about better enforcement of existing trade rules and instead will require new approaches. Canada has taken a range of steps to address Chinese circumvention, as mentioned, including the 100% surtax on Chinese-made EVs and the 25% surtax on imports of steel and aluminum products from China. And these actions align with US trade restrictions on Chinese EVs and on tariffs on steel and aluminum from China. The central policy choice for Canada will be the extent it will be asked to replicate US tariffs and investment screening regime with respect to imports and investment from China and possibly other countries as well. Failure to address US concerns about circumvention risks a successful USMCA review and could lead to ongoing or even higher US restrictions on trade with Canada. While the policy solution is easy to state, determining the extent that Canada should align with the US on its China tariffs and investment restrictions will be challenging, particularly given the extent and size of the US tariffs. In addition, current uncertainty surrounding US policy towards China when it comes to trade also cautions against hastily expanding Canadian tariffs on Chinese imports. As Canada considers calls for alignment, it should also assess what other commitments from the US that Canada would need that would reflect the underlying implication that Canada would be tying its trade policy more closely to that of the US. In order to better assess these concerns, the following pulls from a report I co-authored with Marty Carman and was published recently and analyses the extent we are seeing circumvention in the trade data. We can share a copy of this report with the committee and it is available online at the Brookings USMCA initiative.
Mr. Walter, if you can, sir, your 5 minutes is up. If you could just
Okay, I'm happy to finish there. That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Royce, please.
Very much. Dear members, the Canadian Automobile Dealers Association represents 3,400 franchised car and truck dealers across Canada that employ collectively directly 178,000 people, contribute $28 billion to Canada's GDP, and pay over $6 billion in federal, provincial, and municipal taxes. This year, our members will sell over 1.9 million new vehicles, 1.2 million used vehicles, and write over 31 million service and repair orders. I want to thank you for inviting us to testify today, as the Canadian automotive industry is in the middle of one of its biggest and most complex challenges, as the intricate supply and trading framework that is the foundation of our business is in turmoil due to the changed approach by the current U.S. administration. During the course of these hearings, you will have heard from manufacturers, labor unions, and suppliers in our industry that collectively design, engineer, source, and build vehicles. We are here to convey the opinions and point of view of the consumers. Our members are independent entrepreneurs in every rural, suburban, and metropolitan community in Canada. A lot of you know the dealers in your respective ridings. And our members are intimately involved in providing the right mobility solutions that fit the very divergent needs that each individual consumer has, from finding the right size of vehicle, to the appropriate trim level and drivetrain, to working with financial institutions to facilitate payment options that fit their budgets. We can tell you that the number one concern consumers have is affordability. Will I be able to afford the vehicle I want or need for my transportation? Let me give you some numbers to underline what consumers currently face. According to the most recent Automotive Trends report from Deloitte, 67% of Canadians expect to pay less than $500 a month for their vehicles. The average monthly payments currently are at $770 for lease and $880 for loans. This is only starting to get worse as the full cost impact of the tariffs and trade upheaval works its way through the different supply chains. As you discuss the intricacies of formulating an adjusted industrial and public policy to cope with the changed international landscape, we urge you to not lose sight of our own homegrown issues, in particular the additional affordability pressures caused by the EV mandate. When the electric vehicle availability standard was introduced, the federal government made a number of statements and commitments specifically related to affordability that are not valid anymore. Quote, consumer purchases of ZEVs will be supported by $2 billion invested by the Government of Canada in the Incentive for Zero-Emission Vehicle program. End quote. That support was initially paused and now has been officially canceled. The mandated targets were improbable to begin with due to weak consumer demand, technology limitations across vehicle segments and use cases, as well as infrastructure shortfalls. Removing the purchase incentives moved those targets from improbable to impossible. The federal government's most recent decision to pause the 2026 targets was a very good first step. Now is the time to take the next one and remove these unnecessary targets altogether. You already have greenhouse emission reduction targets in place that will achieve the original intent of reducing emissions, without dictating to industry and consumers what technology to produce and buy. While we're talking about unnecessary and inefficient regulation, let's not forget about the so-called luxury tax. I say so-called because, as mentioned earlier, vehicles are getting substantially more expensive, and it is not uncommon for fully equipped work trucks to hit this particular tax threshold. The so-called luxury tax is a very inefficient tax, as it costs more to administer the separate system reporting and auditing that was set up for it than it is generating revenue. These are all competitive disadvantages our businesses face before we even come to the larger global topics being discussed. Let's make sure we have our own house in order. When it comes to the impending renegotiation of CUSMA, we urge you to consider the deeply integrated nature of our supply chain and businesses when thinking about how to act or react to the most recent developments out of the U.S. The way I put it to a federal minister recently, our main trading partner has just shot us in the foot. Us taking out a gun and shooting ourselves in the other foot might not be a winning strategy. By that we mean imposing retaliatory tariffs will not help with the affordability crisis, quite the contrary. Additionally, we would encourage the government to continue along the path of diversifying Canada's economy away from an overdependence on the U.S. For our industry, we have recommended that Canada consider expanding its automotive regulatory framework, particularly concerning safety and emission standards, to accept vehicles that have been deemed safe and environmentally compliant in other jurisdictions with which Canada has a free trade agreement, specifically European Union, South Korea, and Japan. Thank you very much.
Mr. Royce. Mr. McPherson, please, for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair Scurll, and thank you all committee members for the opportunity to address this very important standing committee for Parliament, especially at this critical moment for our economy and the business community. I'd also like to make a quick shout out to the member from Mississauga South, Mr. MP Peter Fonseca, and I hope that my comments can be helpful to the committee. And I'll note that we worked very closely with our colleagues at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, which of course serve as lead for our chamber network on this important file. As President and CEO of the Mississauga Board of Trade, I lead an organization that represents businesses from a variety of industries, including life sciences, aerospace, post-secondary education, food and beverage, transportation and logistics, information technology, and advanced manufacturing. Really a sampling of many of Canada's most prominent industries. Mississauga is often seen as a suburb of Toronto, and we're proud of our deep relationship with Toronto and our position in the GTA, in particular being home to the Toronto Pearson International Airport. I need to highlight that there are some unique aspects of the city of Mississauga that make it stand out, though, especially in the current tariff war. The city's population represents 5% of our province of Ontario's population and 7% of the province's economic output. More people commute into Mississauga than leave it daily. The city's economy has undoubtedly been impacted by the trade war and the loss of efficient access to the U.S. market, or at least the threat thereof. Mississauga's unemployment rate has risen from 7.3% in 2023 to 9.8% in Q1 of this year. Industries that are heavily connected to Canada-US trade, such as food and beverage and transportation and logistics, have been especially hurt. At this same time, Mississauga's economy is diverse, and we are fortunate to be home to a number of multinational Canadian headquarters, such as Mitsubishi Heavy Industries on the aerospace side, for example, and many global life sciences companies that continue to be resilient and continue to make investments and add key roles to their Canadian workforce. Companies like AstraZeneca, with its $820 million investment earlier this year to expand their R&D facilities and move to a new, larger corporate headquarters. And Roche Canada, that made new commitments in the area of AI with their new global informatics hub, creating 250 new jobs. In short, the CUSMA review, as it pertains to life sciences in particular, and any related tariff or regulatory policies, is an area of great importance to our members in this sector, both large and small. I've mentioned a couple of large entities, but the same holds true for our SME innovators, and I'll acknowledge that this is a Small Business Week in Canada, and we were fortunate to host Minister Valdez and our provincial small business minister this morning to talk about how we can support our small businesses at this time. Microbix, another highly innovative company that produces cutting-edge biological and technical infectious disease diagnostic solutions and viral filling solutions for the global industry, or Seaford Pharmaceuticals, which develops niche products in therapeutic areas. Other members more directly impacted by tariffs would be a company like Mississauga's High Strength Plates and Profiles, which is dealing with the impacts of current steel tariffs imposed by the U.S. And just this morning, I spoke with one of our newest members, a small business called Corpex. They provide end-to-end Industry 4.0 and AI solutions with custom-built machine vision solutions for the manufacturing sector. But this company is also impacted by the current copper and aluminum tariffs that go into the cabling that is used in their applications. At the moment, we're playing defense on many levels. We're trying to hold on to what we have, certainly, but there are still areas of promising growth, and we at MBOT are working to support our members with their evolving market and supply chain diversification strategies. At MBOT, we've always tried our best to make the case for preserving the Canada-U.S. relationship. We've consulted with chambers and other business groups in the U.S. where our members are doing business, and we would prioritize three things with the Canadian Chamber: prioritizing the continuity of CUSMA, not one-year reviews, but something more permanent. Certainty is so important for business. Implementing targeted measures to strengthen the agreement. So there are opportunities to strengthen the agreement. The North American Competitiveness Committee exists within the agreement. We think there's opportunity to expand upon this and find alignment across all three nations in areas such as automotive, aerospace, and defense, life sciences, energy, and advanced manufacturing. And we also need to strengthen North America's economic integration by reducing or eliminating tariffs against each other. We already have side letters that shield Canada and Mexico from certain unilateral trade actions. We should look at whether there are other opportunities to protect Canada and Mexico from these potential unilateral actions, but there's an opportunity here to look at ways that we can all be stronger together, and I think that's the goal. These points are particularly relevant in Mississauga, given our strong integration with global and domestic supply chains, such as we've got the Pearson Economic Zone employing 500,000 people. It's responsible for 6.3% of Ontario's GDP and $42 billion in economic output. So whether it's in regard to Mississauga's transportation and logistics industry or other sectors, it's certainty that drives investment. This should be an underlying theme in the CUSMA negotiations. Certainty drives investment on both sides of the border. I realize I'm at time.
Okay.
I look forward to the committee's questions and discussing how we can support the relationship going forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. McPherson.
Thank
On
you.
to Mr. Chambers, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome to our witnesses, Mr. Williams. Nice to see you again, Mr. Royce. Thank you for coming. If I heard correctly, you represent 3,500 or 3,400 dealers across the country. Is that for all the manufacturers, or is there Is there a group that is not included in that?
That's correct. All manufacturers, all brands, with the exception of those that have, let's call it, a direct-to-consumer business model, which is Tesla. So all other brands that deal with a dealer network are represented by us, be they North American, Korean, Japanese, or North American.
Okay. Just so I'm clear, Tesla doesn't have any manufacturing in Canada, does it?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Oh, that's what. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chambers, if I may add an editorial comment about Tesla, because I spent a lot of time on television talking about how they're a subsidy company, how they get a subsidy on both ends of the equation. They get a sales subsidy when they bought vehicles from here, and then they also get a subsidy from the other manufacturers for projected sales in the EV market.
Yeah, would it surprise you to learn that the subsidy they're getting from the other manufacturers has been in the hundreds of millions of dollars already?
I would say this: it doesn't surprise me at all. I'm aware of those numbers, but I think it would surprise the average taxpayer that Tesla is that this scheme has been developed, and Tesla's taking advantage of it, and that it's not helping small businesses in your riding, dealers in your riding. Tesla has been a subsidized competitor.
Elbows up. You don't have to comment there. But your position on electric vehicles the mandate hasn't really evolved that much. I mean, you've been warning the government for some time that it's been challenging, correct?
However, we'd like to differentiate between our opinion on electric vehicles and the electric vehicle mandate.
Okay.
We are very much for electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are currently a big part of the market solution and will be a growing part of the market solution. But they're not the only technological solution, and this is the critical difference. Our members are selling and servicing electric vehicles as much as they are internal combustion engines, not as much percentage-wise, right? So they're very much committed and have invested millions of dollars in the expectation of being able to sell and service more. To give you one concrete example, to go down into the weeds, rural dealer, Alberta, Sherwood Ford, $800,000 investment on electric vehicle, meaning charging stations, special tools, lifts, forklift to be able to take out a battery of a vehicle, things of that nature, plus training, etc. Sold this year 7 vehicles. You can see how that investment doesn't necessarily pencil. But he's committed, as are all of our members, on the path to electrification. So we're not against electric vehicles. We're against the electric vehicle mandate.
Okay. And so obviously you favor the recent pause, but you would go further, if I understand correctly?
Correct. Okay. We would say that now is the right time to repeal it and to look at other solutions, if they're even necessary. We don't think an additional solution is necessary. There's already a greenhouse gas emission system in place that obligates the manufacturer to continuously keep lowering emissions, but it doesn't prescribe the technology to get there. Whether you get there by a combination of electric vehicles and internal combustion engines with hydrogen, with hybrids, plug-in hybrids or others, pedaled cars, whatever a solution you come up with, and you let the market decide and technology decide.
So in your view, the only way the electric vehicle mandate would work is if the government continued to subsidize the purchase of the vehicles as well. Is that also?
We don't think any type of EV mandate works,
right?
Because it's prescribing a technology instead of an outcome. The outcome is already prescribed, again, with the existing greenhouse gas emission regulations. There is no need to layer something on top of it. We're all in agreement with the outcome that we want to achieve, which is reduce emissions, have a better and safer world for everybody. Absolutely. Everybody agrees with that, with the outcome. It's just the tools being chosen to get there that we disagree with.
And so it's not like the industry has not achieved emissions reductions over the last 20 years, right? I mean, I think of my father still drives an old Toyota 4Runner, early 2000s. That same vehicle today is probably, 30, 40% more fuel efficient with the existing framework.
Absolutely correct. And the good thing is when you look at the actual marketplace, this is being achieved by a different sets of technology. You have certain manufacturers optimizing to an extreme their internal combustion engine. I don't want to necessarily promote one manufacturer over another. Certain manufacturers do it by reducing the emissions, reducing weight on the vehicle, using other composite materials on the vehicle to get the emissions and consumption down. Others do very well with electric vehicles, full electric vehicles. Other manufacturers do very well with hybrids in different iterations.
Perfect. I have 10 seconds left. Our job is to make recommendations to government. So you would recommend to repeal the mandate totally. That's your testimony, correct?
Correct. It is unnecessary.
And are you in favor of reducing the tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles?
The reduction on the Chinese vehicles, that is a discussion to be had with the manufacturers, where they currently stand on that topic. For us, we would just like to outline an example from a different part of the world, what we called the Australia scenario that we transmitted in our trade mission in Washington to the U.S. Senators that we met and our counterparts, which is when Australia no longer had a automotive manufacturing sector. The last one that pulled out was General Motors with the Holden brand that they had there. The Australian government was then faced with a choice. You can no longer protect the jobs in the automotive manufacturing side. So what do? You try to achieve maximum affordability for consumers by opening up your market, and that has led to now the Chinese brands in the last 5 years having about 18-19% of the marketplace.
Thank you, sir. I think we're well over time. I appreciate the chair's indulgence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Fonseca, please.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll thank all of our witnesses. We've had some really excellent and expert witnesses here providing testimony. We approach this committee as Team Canada. Everything that comes to this committee, the recommendations are to make us stronger and more competitive as we get into the CUSMA review, as we look at our economy, as we look at diversification, and I thank all the witnesses are here. We do have the Mississauga Board of Trade and good friend Trevor McPherson, who's, Trevor is somebody who is always there to make those linkages between business and government and try to find ways to take away that friction, look for, to overcome some of those challenges, but also always to look for those opportunities. And I know there's been many. And Trevor, I'm going to ask you about, looking at all of the diverse businesses that we have in Mississauga. And you said we have large businesses, some of the Fortune 500 companies that are in Mississauga. We've also all the way down to our small and medium-sized enterprises, which we are celebrating and championing those enterprises, because this is Small Business Week here in Canada. So what I'd like you to share with us is where those businesses, and you could pick whatever size, have been able to, have that resilience, that innovation, that being able to adapt and to continue to grow, especially in these turbulent times.
Yeah, sure. And thank you very much, MP Fonseca, for that question. I think there are definitely some areas of real promise and some sectors that are doing quite well. Think of Mississauga's technology sector right now, employing 44,000 individuals and approaching 1,000 companies. So that's both large and small across the board. They're in many cases less affected when they're certainly on the software and service side. And we have companies, homegrown companies like Point Click Care in Mississauga that really has dominated their niche market in healthcare and really been a true success stories. Other companies, and we have a really strong food processing manufacturing sector here. The large companies that we know, but also some very specialized companies like Brars Foods, where they were serving the Canadian market. They have recently ventured into the U.S. market before the tariffs really took effect, and we've been working with them to reach out to our counterpart chambers of commerce in the states that they're doing business, because there's real opportunity. But in terms of growth opportunity, a lot of it too. For Mississauga, and a lot of the opportunity can be tied to some of these major infrastructure projects. We are going to see a big expansion of Toronto Pearson Airport. They're going to require a lot of a lot of suppliers, and they'll be looking for Canadian suppliers as well, as many large enterprise are. We're also embarking on the largest hospital in Canada, the hospital build, and so we have a number of companies. So when I think of sectors in Mississauga that can do very well, I'm thinking education certainly, but engineering services as well, that are tied to some of these big projects, these nation-defining projects, if you will. And I think that, our companies in Mississauga are ready and willing to be a part of those projects. On the international side and on the U.S. side, it's those companies, quite frankly. We're still in the early days of understanding where things may go here, but diversification, those companies that were already diversifying both their supply chains and had already a fairly diversified market base. The U.S., was likely still their number one market, but they are faring better, and they're doubling down on those other markets.
Thank you, Trevor. And, we've had discussions about harmonizing regulations. So we talk about that interprovincial trade, things that we can do, that we have control over here in Canada, as well as when you look at the CUSMA review and some of the regulations even between Canada, the United States, and some of that harmonization to help the flow of goods and services. Can you expand on that? I know we've had some talks about that and how important that is and what that means to business.
It's very important. We talk about, breaking down barriers here domestically, reducing red tape. At any level of government, it's important to business. But harmonization, too, whether it's internal trade across the country, and it's great to see the progress that's being made there, but certainly in certain sectors like life sciences, where regulation and harmonization could play a key role in speeding up things like access to innovative medicines here in Canada, where a patient can wait up to 2 years before an innovative drug is listed. And if we had better integration, and I think CUSMA can play a role there on regulation, we can protect and really support the growth of these highly innovative firms that are already investing here in Canada. But it does remain a risk if CUSMA, if the end result is additional regulation that makes it more difficult for Canadian companies to do business, in this case, the life sciences sector, but others as well, in the U.S., that's what, our members are watching out for.
Okay, so we did get your three.
You have 8 seconds remaining.
Yeah, and we thank you for the recommendations that you've given us for the CUSMA review, and thank you very much for all you do for business in Mississauga. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Mr. Savard-Tremblay, please, 6 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Meltzer, you are the principal senior researcher, and you are very, very familiar with major partnerships and agreements in the Pacific. You are an expert in world trade. If we talk about the World Trade Organization, I think it's appropriate for us to mention it today, because even though it might be a scenario which is almost unthinkable if it were ever to happen, that there would not be an agreement, a trade agreement with the United States. We would have other agreements with other world countries. Can you confirm what I have just said and expand on it?
So thank you for the question. I think that's correct. If I understand the question correctly, it is about what the various options for Canada would be in the event that the USMCA was to not continue. I agree with your statement. I don't think this is going to happen, and it's I don't think the US is looking to pull out of the agreement, and I think the agreement will run until 2036, even if there's not a successful review next year. But Canada, of course, is a member of the WTO and has various other free trade agreements, regional trade agreements as well. The TPP is one of them, or the CPTPP, as well as the bilateral with Europe and Japan and other countries. So those agreements obviously remain. I will say that the world of the WTO has changed considerably this year, but also really over the last 8 to 10 years, I think what's clear is that the MFN principle, the most favored nation principle, which kind of is been central to WTO membership and the operation of the WTO, certainly with respect to the US, no longer exists. And even Canada, in small ways, as it's raised tariffs on, for instance, SUVs from China, I know that's under review, essentially did that inconsistent with its WTO commitment. So I think countries are very much walking back from the WTO. The dispute settlement mechanism has stopped working. So the WTO as a foundation for governing trade exists, but it is a lot weaker and is a lot more fractured than it has been in the past. But that would remain, obviously, in the event of no USMCA.
Bon. Si on revient un petit peu sur l'histoire de l'OMC qui est créé le premier.
In history, which was created in January 1975 to the first free trade agreement. It was supported by the United States, and at that time there was support for the entrance of China. It would promote. It was said that it would promote a broader market and would allow for other countries to benefit from a broader opening, not keeping that opening just for one country. And then it was followed by a failure, and the United States, given that, felt that it would seek benefits, advantages from China. Let me ask you, are you in agreement with the summary I've just given?
Yeah, broadly speaking, I think I am. I think that what's going on currently between the US and China is, reflective of a range of, I think, dynamics that are underway. I think what happened in the WTO with respect to China was partly a reflection of some of the limits of the WTO rules. It was also a reflection of decisions that have been made by various Communist Party leaders to take China in a different direction when it comes to the way they thought about trade and integration in the global community, that ultimately was very much at odds with the broader-based trading system based around comparative advantage. Right, the Chinese model is fundamentally premised on overcapacity in manufacturing, which gets exported to the rest of the world, and an increasingly closed internal market, which for the world's second largest economy is very much at odds and not sustainable in the context of a trading system built around largely, not completely, but largely, lower tariffs and leaning into competitiveness and comparative advantage. And then you have the geopolitical competition between the US and China. So the US is responding in various different ways. And part of it is like not pulling out formally from the WTO, but recognizing the limits of what the WTO can do in terms of addressing the China challenge and looking to find alternative ways around that. And this is, where we get to the role of North America, I think, in this context.
20 seconds remaining.
Écoutez,
well, listen. It would be a question of development, and I'll come back to the question later, perhaps during the next round of questioning. But let me ask, to what extent do you think that fear of China justifies the stance that has been taken by the United States vis-a-vis Canada? It's affecting Canada-U.S. relations. I'll come back to that later.
Tremblay gets his next round. Mr. Mantle, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for appearing. Mr. Meltzer, my first questions will be to you. We've heard a lot from our government that despite punishing sectoral tariffs on steel, autos, aluminum, that regardless of those, we in Canada have the best deal with the United States right now. But according to your analysis, which I read, you indicated that according to your review, Canada faces a trade-weighted average tariff of about 9.8%. But at the same time, Mexico's trade-weighted average tariff is about 5.2%. So is it correct, according to your analysis, that Canada actually has currently a worse deal than our primary other partner in North America, that is Mexico?
Yes, more or less. I mean, we've seen these developments recently where tariffs on Canada went up and they didn't on Mexico from 25% to 35%. So that's been one of the kind of implications there. Some of the Section 232 tariffs have hit Canada more than Mexico. I will say that going forward, when you look at the 232 tariffs that are kind of underway, the large truck tariff, the tariffs on pharmaceuticals, semiconductors and so forth, the assessments are that these tariffs are going to hit upwards of 40, if not close to 50% of Mexico trade with the US. So I think that will change, but I think we saw that shift underway because Canada got hit with a higher, effectively IEEPA 35% tariff than Mexico.
Thank you. You've also written quite extensively about the U.S.'s purchase commitments, requirements in other trade deals that it's signed, whether that's with Japan or the United Kingdom. If the United States were to request purchase commitments in any of the deals or whatever might come in the future, do you think Canada should accept that?
It's hard to say in the abstract. Our concern with the purchase commitments was very much targeted. It was not entirely, but it was very much targeted at the China deal because effectively it does two things. It made US exports basically dependent on a government decree in China, which essentially gave China leverage over the US. And you've seen the back and forth on the soybean front where those decisions get fulfilled or they don't get fulfilled. It also is a bit of a zero-sum deal on the Chinese end because a lot of countries sell into China, and so often it means that you're going to substitute American product for maybe Canadian product or Australian product, whatever it may be in the agricultural sector. So it also creates tensions with allies when you sort of make this happen rather than just allowing the market to work out the products that are ultimately going to succeed. I think in the Canadian context, it would have to. I could really only answer that in the context of what was on the table and what was at stake.
Mr. Williams, a question for you. I want to ask you about the so-called luxury tax that was imposed on vehicles by the current government. Could you give me your view on the so-called luxury tax and how that affects affordability in Canada?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you for meeting with our dealers even before you were signed into the office here. You took a meeting when our board was in town. I would say this: the luxury tax is a borrowed idea from the U.S. in the 1990s, where they taxed cars, boats, and airplanes. It failed in the U.S. They had to withdraw it because of the economic damage, and it's just not consistent with our tax system. One of the beauties of the tax system is that we have HST. If when you spend more as a consumer, you pay more in tax, and it's neutral as to what you spend. I think the idea behind targeting those three particular industries just doesn't make any economic sense, and we've seen a real perversion of it in the marketplace. When you have auditors going out, trying to investigate whether you've bought snow tires before and after, and whether those are included in the deal. So, for those members that don't know, we get auditors coming in, and if you buy it during the wintertime and you include summertime tires, some auditors say that should be included. But if you buy it 6 months later from the same dealership, you should be retroactively paying that tax. But if you buy it across the street from Canadian Tire, there's no tax on it. So, I mean, there's some really nonsensical items. I want to give credit to the previous Minister of Finance that he listened to Bill Morneau, that he listened to our pleas to start the tax at $100,000 as opposed to $0, which has lessened the element of it. But as we're under all of these pressures from tariffs, all of these pressures on inputs from steel, aluminum, copper, other things, it is just untenable that we would live in a world with luxury tax. And the cost, to produce it, this luxury tax, is more than they're collecting. It doesn't make any sense.
So to confirm,
I'm sorry,
I think I have a few seconds left.
over. Oh, you do?
No? I'll just say, is it your
Okay, go ahead.
testimony today that the luxury tax should be repealed then?
It absolutely should be repealed.
Thank you very much. Madame Lapointe.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and welcome. Welcome to all of our witnesses. I do have some questions with respect the automobile dealers Association. You cited a figure of the 2.3% used car is being sold every year. Well, thank you for your question, but I'm going to answer in English because my answer will be more precise.
2 million vehicles.
Okay.
In addition to that, there are other used vehicles being sold from individuals to individuals and other dealers that are not franchised by a brand.
OK. Puis, vous disiez que les gens
You
s'attendent
were
à payer.
saying that people expect to pay $500 a month, but unfortunately, it is a matter of $700 a month or $900 a month, depending on whether or not it is a lease or a loan. So, how does that figure into the mean that you spoke about? You've got the loan, and then you have the lease that you have to take into consideration. So on that 1.9% that you've mentioned, how much of it falls into this part of the market?
With us, what I can say is of the total of 1.9 million that our members sell, about 75 to 80% are either financed or leased, right? And the other portion is cash payments, right? Not cash at the dealership, please, but what we call cash deals.
OK. Puis, c'est quoi la vente moyenne? Qu'est-ce que ça serait?
What's an average sale? So what would be an average car sale in Canada for a new car?
Is already above 50,000 Canadian dollars, getting close to $60,000.
OK.
But most consumers don't think in the total number, they think in monthly payments.
Oui, je suis d'accord. Les gens vont penser à c'est un...
Yes, I know that they don't think like that, but I wondered what the level was. That was the aim of my question. For the percentage of the luxury cars that you talked about, how many of the 1.9 are these luxury vehicles?
We would have to come back with that exact data. I don't have it in front of me. We can get it within this.
S'il vous plaît, parce que selon moi,
yes, please do, because I don't think it's that many vehicles. Vehicles between 60 and 100,000. Does that represent some 25%? Inaudible to the interpreter, but I'd like to know exactly if you can give me the figures. You talked about the luxury tax and expressed your thought on it. How many Canadians, though, are going to be able to afford to buy a car like that or a vehicle like that?
And has been at that level, by the way, since it was implemented. So there's not even an inflationary escalation on it. And vehicle prices are constantly creeping up.
OK. Oui, je comprends. Puis dites-moi
I
donc...
understand. So tell me then, when was that luxury tax put in place? Did it lead to a drop in the sale of vehicles? I know you referred cars and planes.
Sales have decreased since then.
OK.
People have started what we call shopping around the tax. And that was even outlined initially when the luxury tax was introduced by the Parliamentary Budget Office, that consumers would react to this tax and would buy around the tax. Buy around the tax meaning they might not buy a new vehicle. They might, if they have a secondary residence in the U.S., for example, buy the vehicle there, register it there. So that has happened, or just delay a purchase.
OK. Intéressant, sauf que faut que tu aies deux endroits à vivre, là, autant...
Very interesting, but not so many people would be involved that would live in both countries. Well, let me go back to figures. EVs or ZEVs. Of the 1.9 million vehicles sold, how many would...
OK. Si on compare avec l'année passée de...
If you compare to 2024, how many EVs were sold versus today? The percentage is important because there's been less subsidies for EVs. Last year, in Canada, we had 14.6%. Last year, 1.8 million vehicles. Of that, 14.6 were zero-emission vehicles. This year, Q2, second quarter, represents 7%.
I mean, the
Je voulais
clerk
savoir la
handles the
différence
clock.
entre le Québec et le Canada.
And
I wanted to know the difference between Quebec and Canada.
Je renvoie ma question tout simplement.
I just refer back to my previous question.
Intéressé par les chiffres. Parce qu'il disait.
And if I understand the question, it was about the justifying concerns, U.S. concerns with respect to China and the response that is taken to Canada.
Oui, est-ce que c'est un facteur?
Yes, is this a major factor in the weakening of Canada-American relationships, economic relationships?
Yeah, I'm not supportive of the actions that the administration has taken with respect to Canada. I think that the view coming into the Trump administration was that we needed to build a stronger, more integrated North America that was more capable of addressing the threat from China, and that this would have to be done as a more integrated partnership. And so the fact that tariffs and other measures were taken against Canada in the first few days of the administration's office, I think took a lot of people by surprise. So, you know, I think the question going forward is does the administration get back onto this broader notion of building a more integrated, unified North American market to compete with China, and what can we unwind in the process to make that a reality? But I realize a lot of damage has been done in the interim.
Je comprends que vous pensez que
I understand that I think what you're indicating would be the looking towards China and Indonesia, that there should be some cooperation in the future. North America can't do it alone, but do you believe that is this one of the reasons for the weakening of Canadian-American trade relations?
I don't think it's been a primary driver up to date. I think concerns about China circumvention, while they're there, we've seen obviously action taken both in Mexico and in Canada to address some of these concerns, particularly around steel and aluminum, also around SUVs and other products. So there is action that has been taken. I think everyone recognises the issue, and there is a debate about the scope of the challenge and what to do going forward, but steps have been taken. So I don't think this was the primary driver of what led the administration to put tariffs on China and Canada. I think China and Mexico have been wrapped up in a. I mean, this is a bigger conversation about what the administration is doing with its trade policy and what it's seeking to achieve. But I do think it's notable that, notwithstanding the tariffs, that most Canadian and Mexican trade remains zero tariff and when compliant with USMCA. And I think that the fact that the US has stuck to USMCA and has enabled that to happen, I think also sends a good signal.
thank you very much. For the remaining two speakers, it'll be like 2.5 minutes. Okay, Mr. McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Meltzer, it's my understanding that Australia has recently entered into a multi-billion-dollar agreement with the U.S. in respect of critical minerals. Can you comment on that?
Not in detail. I am Australian, and I did spend a number of years in the Australian Foreign Service, but I've been long enough in Washington that it's not an issue I follow closely. But I can do my best to answer any specific questions you have.
My question is, what is Australia doing right and Canada doing wrong?
Look, it's a great question, and it's actually I don't know enough. So, you know, there are just important differences between where Australia sits and where Canada sits. The trade relationship that Australia has with the US is significantly smaller, and the US has a surplus with Australia. It's a very complementary relationship. Australia doesn't really sell many manufactured products to the US, a lot of primary products and energy. So it just raises different types of issues for the administration. So I think that's the first thing. Australia and the US also just have a very, very deep and long-standing security relationship, and Australia just plays a different role in the security landscape to Canada, and particularly as you look more closely at China, and I think the role Australia plays in that part of the world. So I think Australia just has a different level of a strategic importance for the US as well. And so I think these factors mean that doing deals on critical minerals and on AUKUS just take on a different resonance in the administration.
Fair enough, Mr. Meltzer, but clearly we have a close relationship, Canada, with the U.S., and Canada has a great interest in critical minerals.
100%, and I think this is a key area that Canada needs to be leaning into and developing. I mean, I think that not only is the US clearly going to need to partner with Canada on critical minerals, my sense is that Canada needs to be building out its critical minerals mining and refining capacity in order to actually create its own leverage in this relationship as well.
Key word that Mr. President Trump uses quite a bit, and that's leverage, something we need to work on here.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lavoie, please, for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Mr. McPherson. You talked about a lot about certainty, and I understand that that certainty aspect is very important in trade, is what we want for our businesses, certainty. But given the current context, and this is a question I ask very often, you don't want to wait until it stops raining to dance under the rain. This is a saying that we have. So what we have before us is a situation where there is no certainty. What about predictability? How can the government and business move forward on a basis of certainty? Is there a type of aid that can help Canada more than one other type?
That's a very good question, and thank you for it. I think that it's a complicated matter when it comes to mitigating this uncertainty for firms, and it probably varies by industry as well. I think that the best way, at the moment is in the short term. We see all levels of government looking at how they can support through the short term to reduce that uncertainty. In the longer term, though, it's really working at the areas where we have more scope of control, and that is diversifying our trade and diversifying our supply chains. And the other thing I'll add too is upskilling is also a key component of this as well. And I think we need to keep our eye on ensuring that our workforce is skilled up in all of the areas that are transforming our business community, from AI and technology, but also upskilling in ways that better enable them to take advantage of international opportunities. One thing that we do observe here at the Board of Trade, and I think others have observed as well, is that Canada does enjoy many free trade agreements globally, but the uptake, similar to our expertise in AI itself, the uptake and the adoption from the private sector has been less than optimum in what it could be. So I'm encouraged that the government is looking at ways to open up new doors in other markets. But it's one thing for the door to be open. It's another thing for a company to walk through it. So we very much would like to continue to work with all levels of government to ensure that the incentives are there beyond the incentive of it's difficult for our business in the U.S., that the incentives are there for companies to truly pursue a longer-term international diversification strategy with regard to their sales.
Thank you very much, Mr. McPherson. To all our witnesses, thank you very much. We appreciated your valuable testimony from everyone. I will suspend for a moment while we change witnesses. Thank you very much. From the Canadian Aluminum Extruders Coalition, we have Mike Kilby, Chief Executive Officer from Decor Aluminum Limited. And from the Canola Council of Canada, we have Troy Sherman, Senior Director, Government and Industry Relations. And by video conference, we have Global Automakers of Canada, David Adams, President by video conference. Welcome to you all. Mr. Kilby, I invite you to speak to the committee for up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here today to represent a coalition of aluminum extruders from Canada. This coalition of 8 represents a majority of aluminum extrusion industry in Canada. Today, we come together with an urgent voice because the U.S. tariffs have created a crisis for our Canadian operations. This situation is already causing us severe disruption and threatening thousands of good-paying jobs. The future of our industry is in jeopardy. We are seeking support at this critical time. Our companies are downstream aluminum companies that purchase primary aluminum, mainly from smelters in Quebec. We extrude it We often add value-added services such as machining, fabrication, paint, and anodizing. We are not primary aluminum producers, and therefore our situation needs quite a different treatment than the primary aluminum smelting industry. The companies I represent today represent approximately 80% of the Canadian extrusion industry capacity. We serve a variety of industries: automotive, building and construction, consumer products, distribution, industrial, medical, military, and electrical. Our aggregated sales are approximately $2.5 billion annually, and we directly employ approximately 3,500 people across the country. We also purchase and further process millions of kilograms of Canadian-made primary aluminum every year. The North American extrusion demand of approximately 4 billion pounds is mostly in the U.S., and we rely on unrestricted access to this market. The impact of the tariffs has materially impacted our ability to export to the U.S., resulting in job losses and uncertain future for our industry. To make matters worse, foreign aluminum extrusions, which can no longer find their way into the U.S. market, are diverting into the Canadian market. We are asking to be supported and consulted with as Canada works to resolve current trade issues and negotiate future ones. The tariff impact to downstream aluminum producers is very different than the primary producers, and we need support to protect this vital part of the Canadian aluminum industry. Specifically, we're requesting the negotiation to eliminate the tariffs on the Canadian aluminum exported to the U.S., stopping the diversion of extruded products into Canada, both direct and indirect, and ensuring a seat at the table as Canada formulates a policy and negotiates CUSMA 2.0, provide the same support and considerations available to other important industries such as steel and automotive. Recently, and prior to the U.S. imposition of tariffs, the U.S. Aluminum Extruders Association launched an anti-dumping case against 15 nations. Most of these are low-cost countries, and amongst those, Mexico was included. And I'll talk about Mexico separately in a moment. The U.S. Trade Commission found that there was dumping from each of those nations, but did not go as far as to impose anti-dumping duties at that time. And this finding is under appeal currently. Our industry in Canada took note of this situation and began discussing launching a similar trade case as we see similar dumping into Canada. The threat of a U.S. anti-dumping finding already causes companies to shift their business and start bringing product into Canada, weakening our industry and potentially creating a perceived backdoor into the U.S. market. This Canadian trade case initiative was overshadowed by the U.S. aluminum tariffs, but has not gone away. In fact, it is more critical than ever that something be done to stem the flow of foreign extrusions coming into Canada at considerable price advantage. The tariffs have changed the market cost structure, making Canada an attractive market for foreign metal. Our industry seeks an immediate barrier to provide time to bring forward a trade case. A trade case will take a couple of years, and we simply don't have that amount of time. With respect to Mexico, at the conclusion of the CUSMA negotiations, a last-minute change was requested by Mexico to remove the 70% North American-sourced raw aluminum content from autos. This was odd because Mexico was not a smelter of aluminum, and at the time there was significant concern that this could create a backdoor through Mexico for Chinese aluminum to enter the North American market. Rio Tinto and myself attended a trade committee meeting here at the time to present this concern. The entry of Chinese aluminum through Mexico did and is occurring and was part of the U.S. anti-dumping case that included Mexico. As an industry, we believe it's important to have a voice at future CUSMA negotiations to help avoid this type of outcome in the future. I would like to convey one final point. As a significant downstream market for the aluminum smelting industry in Canada, it is imperative that the aluminum extrusion industry survive. If it does not, the sourcing of aluminum extrusions will move offshore to the least cost countries, and that will have a direct impact on the primary aluminum market here in Canada, as well as other businesses, Canadian businesses. A vertical integration of aluminum processing will be lost. On behalf of the Canadian Aluminum Extruders Coalition, I'd like to thank the committee for allowing us to appear here today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kilby. Mr. Sherman, please, for up to 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Chair Scro, members of the committee. Thank you very much for the invitation to join you today. My name is Troy Sherman, and I am the Senior Director of Government and Industry Relations at the Canola Council of Canada. The Canola Council of Canada is a national value chain organization representing approximately 40,000 canola farmers, together with exporters, processors, and life science companies. As a value chain organization, our goal is to ensure the industry's continued growth and success, and to do this by meeting domestic and global demand for canola and canola-based products, including canola seed, oil, and meal. Our industry represents $43.7 billion in direct, indirect, and induced economic activity annually, supports over 200,000 jobs across the country, and provides $16 billion in wages annually. Canola also represents one of the largest sources of farm cash receipts in the country. International trade is vital to the success of the industry. The vast majority of canola products are destined for international markets, with exports totaling $14.5 billion in 2024. For the Canadian canola industry, the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement, or CUSMA, is essential to tariff-free and rules-based continental trade. Exports to the U.S. and Mexico totaled approximately $8.26 billion in 2004, with the U.S. representing $7.7 billion and Mexico representing $559 million. The U.S. is the canola industry's top market for canola oil and meal, and canola exports to Mexico are often the top agricultural export from Canada. Like a number of other industries and sectors, the North American canola industry is highly integrated. For example, canola grown in the prairies may have been researched in the United States, harvested here in Canada, and exported to Mexico to be crushed and transformed into oil and meal. Or you may find that Canadian grown and processed canola is exported as oil to the United States for use in food manufacturing or as a feedstock to produce biodiesel or renewable diesel. CUSMA is the linchpin that enables smooth, predictable, and free market trade of Canadian canola across the continent. It also provides the trade architecture that allows Canada, the U.S., and Mexico to address issues of concern, find opportunities for collaboration, and raise the level of ambition for growth of industries in each of our three countries. As Canada prepares for the upcoming CUSMA review and the possibility of negotiations, the canola industry has the following priorities: maintaining tariff-free trade for agricultural products, including canola and canola products; maintaining the trilateral nature of the agreement to ensure that continental trade is governed by a common set of rules; preserving CUSMA's dispute settlement mechanism so that the parties have recourse in the event there is a trade policy that is disruptive, trade restrictive, or counter to sound science-based decision-making; maintaining or raising the level of ambition for the sanitary and phytosanitary chapter, and ensuring that sanitary and phytosanitary measures are aligned with science-based and risk-based principles; and moving the Canada-US Regulatory Cooperation Council under CUSMA to provide it with a formal governance structure and a regular work plan. These measures will help the Canadian canola industry maintain and indeed grow markets in the U.S. and Mexico through predictable rules-based trade while being uncompromising in the level of ambition we set for continental trade. In summary, CUSMA has been a foundational agreement that has served the Canadian canola industry well. While there may be a need to modernize or update targeted elements of the agreement, on the whole, the agreement should be preserved and continue to serve as a benchmark for future free trade agreements in both structure and ambition. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear today. I look forward to the discussion and answering any questions the committee may have.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Adams, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for not being there in person today, but I do thank you and the members of the committee for the opportunity to speak to you on behalf of the 16 member companies of the Global Automakers of Canada. The Global Automakers of Canada is a national trade association representing the Canadian interests of 16 of the world's most significant automakers. Our members are collectively responsible for more than 62% of vehicle sales in Canada, and our two manufacturing members, Toyota and Honda, are Canada's largest and second largest vehicle producers, representing through the end of September 75.5% of Canadian light-duty vehicle production. In fact, each of Honda and Toyota have built more vehicles in Canada so far this year than the Detroit Three combined. Additionally, GAC member Volkswagen and their partner PowerCo remain in the process of building up the $7 billion factory in St. Thomas, Ontario, that is slated to employ up to 3,000 individuals directly in that battery facility. Importantly, the members and their dedicated automotive parts suppliers employ more than 110,000 people, and the activities of the members support more than 106,000 additional jobs across the country, including close to 18,000 auto parts manufacturing jobs in Quebec and Ontario. While this picture of the membership's activity in Canada is positive, it is being challenged by the current 232 tariff situation and the U.S. administration's seeming disregard for the provisions of the CUSMA, which was the product of hard-fought negotiation 6+ years ago. With respect to the 232 tariffs on autos, we need a solution on both sides of the border, tariffs and retaliatory tariffs, as soon as possible. Meeting the requirements of the agreement has not, my apologies. With respect to CUSMA, Canada's position needs to be one of strongly defending a trilateral CUSMA as an agreement that works and provides tangible benefits to the U.S. auto industry. The CUSMA has the most stringent rules of origin of any modern trade agreement in the world, with a supercore parts requirement, a very aggressive regional value content requirement, a labor value content requirement. Presumably, it was these attributes that led President Trump to calling the USMCA at the time the fairest, most balanced, and beneficial trade agreement we have ever seen.
Okay, hold on, Mr. Adams. We seem to have lost the connection.
He has fallen off. They're calling him.
Okay.
But in the meanwhile, I don't know if you want to go to questions.
Yeah, I think we'll have to, maybe we'll just go to questions and then go back to Mr. Adams when we get him back on the line. He has 2.5 minutes left for him. Okay, so Mr. Adams, we have you back? Okay, now you're can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Sorry about that. I apologize. Not sure what happened there. Sorry, let me continue. All businesses need certainty, and when in this regard, the elimination of the sunset clause, section 34(7), would be an ideal way to enshrine this. A case in point, the United States has chosen to completely ignore the binding automotive side letter specifically designed to insulate Canada from the application of these 232 tariffs to Canada's benefit, while also effectively capping automotive exports to the United States for the benefit of the United States. If such seemingly win-win provisions arising out of the negotiation cannot be counted on, it calls into question the credibility of the agreement. The CUSMA was key to securing additional investment in North America, as all automakers needed to consider how to meet the challenge of moving up from 62.5% regional value content to 75% regional value content. While these provisions benefited the U.S., they also benefited Canada and Canadian parts makers. Moreover, the labor value content requirements, while primarily benefiting the United States production, also benefited investment in Canada. Meeting the requirements of the agreement has not been easy, as evidenced by the fact that 12 automakers petitioned for alternative staging regimes to provide them with additional time to meet the requirements of the agreement. A key goal of the CUSMA review should be to ensure that Canada continues to enjoy tariff-free access to the U.S. market for automotive products, provided the stringent negotiated provisions of the agreement are adhered to. It is imperative for Canada to maintain a vehicle manufacturing footprint. With autos and auto parts being the nation's second largest export sector, we can ill afford to lose this sector and the nearly 500,000 jobs that rely on it. The implementation of the agreement is still relatively new, and as such, we do not recommend any wholesale change to the agreement at this time. If there are any specific changes, areas of coverage that need to be Made the agreement would suggest a surgical approach to integrating such changes. This is, after all, a review and was not intended to be a wholesale renegotiation. Canada has played its part as a key partner in an integrated North American automotive sector through the adoption of harmonized safety and emission standards with those of the United States and adopting a similar stance regarding challenges posed by Chinese electric vehicles. More than 40% of Canada's sales are American-built product, and despite assertions to the contrary, the United States has an automotive trade surplus with Canada. These points need to continue to be emphasized to the U.S. administration to underscore the benefits to the United States of having Canada as a core automotive trading partner. Madam Chair, members, thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adam. On to Mr. Grollo, please, for 6 minutes.
Madame la Présidente, bonjour, chers amis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr.
Mr. Sherman, vous êtes le directeur principal.
Mr. Sherman, you are the director, the senior director for the Canola Council of Canada. I want to speak to the situation in your area. The tariffs on China. China has imposed 100% tariffs against Canada. What is the consequence for producers, for canola producers?
Surprise to members of this committee, we are facing a very serious challenge with China. As you mentioned, we are currently facing 100% anti-discrimination tariffs on canola oil and meal, as well as a provisional anti-dumping duty of 75.8% from on canola seed. China is our second largest market, our top market for canola seed, our second largest market for canola meal, and there aren't that many $5 billion markets out there. And so I think we're going to have a pretty good harvest this year, better than many had even expected, which is great news typically for farmers. But the impacts are immediate. We're seeing impacts in terms of farmers, what's happening at the basis for them. We saw a significant hit in futures when these tariffs and anti-dumping duties were announced. There's a lack of predictability for farmers about where that product will be able to go. And so farmers are trying to figure out if we're going to hold on to that crop and not be able to sell it. There are cash flow concerns. People are looking at potentially buying new combines, new sprayers. Those are usually in the $1.2 million expenses. And for large parts of the country, canola is the single largest farm cash receipt. And so it's very impactful right now, and I would say it's impactful for farmers, but it's also extremely impactful for exporters and processors as well, who also face potentially underutilized assets.
Merci. Est-ce que vous avez le sentiment que le gouvernement libéral...
Thank you. Do you feel that the Liberal government is supporting farmers in this time of crisis?
Obviously, some significant discussions with the federal government on this issue. As members of the committee might know, the Prime Minister announced some support measures on September 5th. We did feel that those support measures did miss the mark, and we do need to make sure that they are right-sized to be able to account for the impact that we are facing now and going into the fall and winter, which is typically when there's a lot of sales that do happen in our industry. And so we are hopeful that we can get some changes to some of the programs and the policies that the federal government announced at the time, including on the biofuel production incentive and some changes to the clean fuel regulations as well.
Merci. Moi, je viens de la région de La Beauce.
I come from La Beauce. That's my riding. And our number one product and concern is agriculture. We're very proud of it. But unfortunately, for some weeks now, and I've been talking to a lot of people in the grains area, they tell me that they feel it's not the priority of the government currently. Do you have that feeling too?
They would feel that absolutely, right? And I think that this is, when this all happened and we were faced with anti-discrimination tariffs back in March, we had urged the government to react quickly and swiftly, given the impact on our industry in the same way that they were reacting quickly and swiftly for other sectors of the economy as well. So I think that we are always in this struggle between different sectors of the economy and different regions. We all want Canada to be successful. We all want our sectors and industries to be able to grow. But I think the sentiment, if you were to ask a Western Canadian farmer right now, is that they are often overlooked.
C'est quand même 40 000 agriculteurs, si j'ai bien.
But it is 40,000 farmers that you represent, if I understood.
Milliards de dollars.
And it's $43 billion. And you don't feel that you're being listened to?
With ministers, and we did have a meeting with the Prime Minister back in September as well. We are encouraged that the federal government is putting in significant efforts in working with China. The Prime Minister has met with his counterpart on the margins of the UN General Assembly back in September. That was based off of a call that they had in June. Minister Anand was there last week as well. Premier Mo and Parliamentary Secretary Blois were in China also. And so this engagement is important. We think that we need more of that, and so we're encouraged by where we're going. But we need to resolve this issue as soon as possible.
Pour nous, les conservateurs, c'est une
For us conservatives, this is a high priority. I have another question. In the election campaign, during the campaign, their platform, there was counter-tariff and supplementary.
For a while, obviously, the Europeans have decided to move forward in that space. Your colleagues over in the Agriculture Committee did a study on this as well. And so we do have concerns about how that could be implemented, particularly if it means additional administrative burden on an already very burdened industry when it comes to administration and red tape. And so anything that would be disproportionate in that area would be significant for us as a time where we need to be even more competitive than we've been historically as a result of the current geopolitical trading environment we find ourselves in.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Sherman.
thank you very much. Mr. Lavoie, please, for 6 minutes.
Oui, merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The question is for Mr. Kirby, Mr. Kilby, rather. I'll give you time to put your earpiece in. Mr. Kilby, can you hear? Yeah. My question is a very simple one, but I'd like you to develop it. What is your opinion on the government's decision to eliminate interprovincial barriers to promote better trade within Canada? What are your comments?
In our industry, I don't see any real competition or barriers between us as colleagues and competitors for aluminum extrusion. So I don't see, I was together with some colleagues yesterday at a smelter in Quebec, and we're all the same. We all are buying our metal from them, and this time of year is when we set our contracts for next year. So we all have come together in the past to fight anti-dumping duties against China, or get anti-dumping duties in place against China. So we don't typically have any issues moving metal across provincial boundaries.
Merci, Monsieur Kilby.
Thank you, Mr. Kilby. My next question is for Mr. Adams. Mr. Adams, I will repeat a question that my colleagues are probably tired of hearing, but I think it's relevant in the current context. For those who don't know, I worked 20 years in banking, and the businesses were my priority, if you like. And then after that, I was at the Chamber of Commerce. So we've talked about certainty, about that. There was a need for it, and now the world has changed. It's been 50-some years since we've seen a situation like this. So we do not see certainty on a short term right now. Businesses need certainty to be able to do business, to be able to develop their markets. So given that, what would your opinion be about the choices that the government should make to help businesses to continue to move ahead despite the fact that there are difficulties? We would like to say, would you not like to see a return of predictability? We in banking always felt that, But we know that that predictability will not return tomorrow morning. So what is your advice to give to Canada's new government?
Thank you very much for the question. I think the reality, as you say, is that everyone is looking for certainty regardless of business. I think what the government has been doing in terms of trying to provide support to businesses, whether it's ours or canola sector that are affected by the tariffs, is important, but it's temporary relief. It's not certainty. So I think getting to a review of the USMCA CUSMA agreement that reestablishes a rules-based environment for our trade with the United States is key, given that in the automotive sector, 85% of the product, regardless of manufacturer, goes into the U.S. market. So getting the relationship sorted out with the United States on a tariff basis and a trade basis through the USMCA would be key.
OK, y a-tu gelé ou il y avait juste...
Is it frozen or what? I think it's frozen again. Okay, no, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Adams. My next question is for Mr. Sherman. Thank you for being here, Mr. Sherman. We've spoken about the exceptional context in which we are living. We've heard about tariffs, the United States, and China. So there were other countries in the world that have had tariffs imposed upon them. The world market is being totally upended. I'd like to hear you speak to us about diversification at all levels. Is it possible at the short or medium term to increase exports to Europe? And if so, what logistical chain would allow us to do so?
Partner with us is a long-standing market, but it's not without challenges. In fact, 100% of what we export to the European Union is for biofuel, not for food consumption. So there are significant challenges with that market, including their most recent vision for agriculture, which was announced back in February of this year, that talks about a new trade policy that they will be exploring around reciprocity and mirror clauses, which would further undermine the global trading system. And so when we look to Europe, we have to do so with eyes wide open. It is not an easy market to work in. We are comforted that they are making some progress on key policies that are important for us, including new genomic techniques. But Europe is not a panacea when it comes to diversification for the Canadian canola industry.
OK. Alors, vous me dites que...
So you're saying...
Allez, ben merci. Je vais laisser le temps à mes collègues.
Thank you. That's enough. I'll leave my time.
Monsieur Kilby, je me rappelle.
Mr. Kilby, I remember at the beginning of my first mandate, I've been 6 years now here on this committee. There was only the Madam Chair and myself who were there amongst the members sitting around the table today. But there was a time where we said that certain things would be reassessed over the years, and that time's gone by very quickly. We find ourselves here in the House of Commons, and particularly at that time, we were 22 bloc members, but there has been a change in CUSMA. The standards and the codes were not the same. In terms of the codes for steel, for car parts, there was a minimum percentage of 70%. But when you talk about steel as a material, the metal itself, but in terms of aluminum, it was we referred to aluminum parts, not smelted aluminum or cast aluminum, rather. And so there is this difference in Mexico. Now, aluminum will actually come from China, go into Mexico, and come into Canada as being a product of Canada. They're on to the United States. Do you think that the changes that were put on steel would help your industry, your aluminum industry?
The question. Back at the conclusion of CUSMA, we did raise this concern. Rio Tinto and the extrusion industry, I represented myself, and we came forward with this exact concern that Chinese aluminum would enter the U.S. market and the Canadian market through Mexico. Both Canada and the United States have anti-dumping duties in place for extrusions with China. Canada went first in 2009. It's been upheld for 15 years, and just recently, a couple of months ago, it's been upheld again for another 5 years, and the U.S. went second in 2011. I entered this market in 2010, and I can tell you firsthand that metal was coming through the United States into Canada at that time when the anti-dumping duties were in place in Canada, but not the United States. So we already saw what happens when you don't have a good policy in place to prevent some of that. So the exclusion of the 70% content at the conclusion of CUSMA was a concern, and it did, in fact, result in metal coming in from China into Mexico that finds its way into Canada and the United States on vehicles, and that's something we would like to try to mitigate in the future.
Donc, dans le cadre de cette révision.
In the case of this review, do you think, well, of course, there are going to be all types of negotiations about the rules of origin and so on. Would you like to have aluminum have the same status of steel?
That would be a great outcome. Recently, Canada put a 25% tariff on raw aluminum coming from China, and that has some effect in helping our market because those parts that use China-sourced raw aluminum that enter the North American market come at a premium because of that 25% duty. However, many do not. So the arbitrage, the price change or difference between Canada now and Europe and other low-cost countries has gotten significant enough that we become an attractive market again. So all these things are always moving, and especially when there's been a disruption like we've had with the tariffs where things are being repriced and cost bases are changing, we're seeing the negative impacts of that.
Je pense que vous avez quand même bien expliqué que le dumping
You explained very clearly that dumping would continue, and 5 or so years ago, that was a very much missed opportunity. That was clear. Do you think that there should be something put in place to promote and help production in the future? But let me just turn to ecology and the environment. I come from Quebec. Quebec is very environmentally friendly. But now we're talking about technology that can produce aluminum that is environmentally friendly in the future. Are you concerned about the aluminum from China that is produced using coal? Are you concerned about that?
Yes, it is true that if you look at Quebec smelted aluminum, it's around 4 tons per ton of aluminum, 4 tons of carbon per ton of aluminum produced, versus what you would find in China, around 17 tons per ton. And there's no accounting for that difference in the regulations and the things that we do here in Canada, including paying carbon tax, which thankfully for the moment has been suspended so that we can muddle through here during all this turmoil, but yes, that disparity is a cost factor in our industry, and it creates an unfair or disadvantage for North American suppliers of aluminum extrusions.
Thank you very much. Mr. McKenzie, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Adams, first of all, a question to you, if I might, sir. Our Liberal government has been, I might say, or describe it as warming relationships with our relationship with China. I wonder if you could comment on what you might see as an outcome if protective tariffs on Chinese EVs coming into Canada are lowered.
Well, I think what I would say is that if you look at what's happened in other jurisdictions, if tariffs are lowered, the Chinese enter into the marketplace and basically more or less enter it aggressively and take over a large chunk of that marketplace. I think in Europe, the penetration in Europe right now with Chinese automakers is around 15% after being in that market for, I believe, about 2 or 3 years now. So I think the prospect for Canada when we're trying to grow our own EV ecosystem here is daunting, and it would also undermine our manufacturing base in Canada.
It seems to me as well our government has provided supports to industry to grow our capacity for domestic EV production. I presume that would be put in peril.
I believe so, yes. And I think what we do have is an opportunity with the tariffs in place to grow our EV ecosystem, but we need to get on with it. We need to proceed with the provisions to try and get the minerals out of the ground faster, get more swift environmental assessments completed, so on and so forth.
So that would be about developing our own domestic supply chain, if you will.
Correct.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, those comments. Mr. Kilby, I'm wondering if you're feeling on the whole that your segment of the industry is not receiving a great deal of attention. I can't escape an image that you and other extruders are the little guy watching the ball go back and forth across you from or over top of you and being caught up in that battle. Is that something you're concerned about, a lack of attention from our federal government right now?
Yes, it's very accurate, and thank you for this question. Our industry is integral with the primary producers, but much different. Theirs is a global commodity and it ships anywhere in the world as ingot or as logs or whatever product they're selling. Ours is more geographic. It's limited by trucking distances and those types of things that make it only competitive to an extent in our country. And we all have our little zones of influence in our extrusion companies. So yes, it's sorry, I've lost my train of thought, but the could you repeat your question? It's just the essence of it.
No problem at all. It's a big industry to be lost in, and I'm just wondering if the extruders are being perhaps not given due in the bigger picture.
Coming back to the beginning here, yes, the primary aluminum smelters are the recognized industry in Canada. Everybody knows that industry. What they don't realize is there are aluminum casters and extruders that take that product and turn it into parts that go into the autos that we drive and the trains that we travel on and the office furniture that we sit on. So all that stuff is vertically integrated in the North American market here.
And generally, it's my sense from what you've described and others before the committee today and in other dates that transshipment or the fact that a product comes in from different parts of the world, in particular China, which has a particular disposition to frankly try to subsidize production from that country to a point where it will drive domestic production out of business in other countries.
Yes.
But that product is coming in, it gets lost perhaps once it's manufactured or remanufactured. What can we do about that?
Yeah, it is a bit of a whack-a-mole type of problem for us where we have to be vigilant on what China's doing now to move metal into the market. And that was the reason for the U.S. trade case. That's the reason we were considering another trade case. Where we find ourselves today, though, this sudden disruption is creating a real immediacy. And in the past, our industry's been patiently gone through the rules-based system of a trade case. However, this time, we really need urgent action to help keep that stuff out while we address the issues of a trade case, which we're willing to do. But we need some immediate barriers to keep it out so we have an industry to maintain.
Sir, I'm sure my colleagues from the House who are part of the government caucus opposite us here at the moment are hearing you and will take your concerns forward to the government of the day.
Thank you, Mr. McKenzie. You have 4 seconds left. All right, on to Mr. Fonseca for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. And we all know that Canada produces the best canola. We produce amazing cars. We have an amazing aluminum sector, and we make that case. And what I'm going to be asking each of you is to make the case to our U.S. partners. The importance of this partnership. Like we have in my opinion, it's been about a level playing field. It's that our labor standards, our environmental standards, the way that we do business, our people-to-people ties. Understand we had Linamar here at our committee, one of the biggest auto parts manufacturers, and they have plants all over the world, and they say that Canada's plants are their most productive plants in the world. And that productivity and that competition, even with the United States, in a good way, actually brings everybody up and allows for the best product to be made at the best price here in North America, and then in turn also exported around the world. So making that case, I'll start with Mr. Adams, making that case for the CUSMA review and how important this is, not only to Canada, but also to the United States, and not having the right outcomes of that review will hurt the United States. So I would like to make that case.
Sure. What I would say is, and you pointed it out, is that at least my members' plants, a number of them have won international awards for their quality and whatnot, production in Cambridge, Woodstock, what have you. So we produce a quality product. We produce a product that by an excellent labor force, and we also have the benefit of having a public healthcare system in Canada that actually supports affordability of those products going into the United States as well. Challenge for the United States is when you're trying to repatriate your industry, all you're doing is adding costs by undermining the existing supply chains that have actually benefited the United States over the course of the last 60 years since we had sectoral free trade agreement with the United States in the automotive industry. So I think those are the types of arguments that we need to be making to the United States, that it's actually in their benefit to have Canada as a strategic partner for a competitive North American or U.S. automotive industry.
Thank you. And we don't want to see ourselves or our American friends see the cost of a car go up. We've already heard the average cost of a car here is getting close to $60,000. And by disrupting the whole supply chain and the system that we have now, you'll see those prices increase, as we've seen on home prices in the U.S. with softwood lumber, where it's added thousands of dollars to homes. And Mr. Kilby, just on aluminum, our competitiveness and the case that you would make to the U.S.
Yes, I have factories on both sides of the border, and I can tell you that the productivity in Canada exceeds the one in the United States. They're both very good, and we do optimize between plants where it makes sense geographically to optimize. These are things that are beneficial for Canada and the United States to keep the lowest cost product. If you look at the aluminum, the primary aluminum situation, it goes where the cheapest power is. The primary aluminum smelting, it needs cheap power, and so the U.S. with natural gas-fired power is not a low-cost power country. That hydroelectric power, resides in Canada, and cheap natural gas also resides in Alberta and British Columbia, where there are smelters. So if you're going to put incremental capacity anywhere, the best bet in an integrated North American market is to put it in Canada. And then you want to have the supporting industries around it. So it makes really good sense that we stay integrated to that extent. And the U.S. is missing the boat on that and unnecessarily paying extra, 50% on their metal, where it seems just ludicrously not necessary.
And I hope they're hearing this testimony also in Washington, D.C. And Mr. Sherman, please.
Just briefly, Mr. Sherman.
Yeah, so look, I'll tell you that Canadian canola is good for American workers, it's good for American companies, and it's good for American communities. We know, and we just commissioned a study last year, that Canadian-grown canola contributes $11.2 billion USD in economic activity in the United States annually, $1.2 billion in USD in wages, and supports 22,000 jobs. So we know that we're having a real economic impact in the United States, which speaks to the strength of CUSMA.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes.
This is very interesting what you've just said, Mr. Sherman. here. You say 20,000 jobs there. It's something that's in processing, that processing what was exported from here. What is it for? Canola oil, or is it for some other product?
Food end uses has typically been our bread and butter when it comes to the United States. And so just to give you an example, so canola's impact in food end uses has nearly doubled over the past decade, generating $8.7 billion in economic activity in 2022 and 2023. We're also seeing a significant increase in canola oil exports to the United States as a result of the growing biofuel market down there. And so with the 45Z tax credit that was part of the President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, we were managed to get North American feedstocks covered as eligible for that production tax credit. And so we are seeing a significant increase in exports of canola oil for biofuel production down south.
À l'inverse, est-ce qu'on reçoit du canola américain qui est
And do we bring in canola oil as well?
It's about 2 to 2.5 million acres produced, or 2 to 2.5 million metric tons produced. We're about 20 million metric tons produced. So we're a factor of 10 in terms of production here. And so there will be some integration in terms of maybe some of the research or development will be done in the United States, and seed will be exported to Canada for planting, but it's not seed that's used for crush to then be used for oil or meal. The other thing that I will say is the U.S. is our top market for canola meal as a result of their very large dairy herds, particularly in California. And so we've seen significant benefits exporting canola down there because Canadian canola is excellent for dairy herds and helps actually produce additional liters of milk per day as part of the feed rations for dairy cows.
Eux, ils n'ont pas la capacité, autrement dit,
In other words, they don't have the capacity they need to produce to feed their own flocks or herds of cows.
Soy, and so soybean meal is used quite heavily in the United States as well. But we found a place where canola meal can outperform soybean meal, not just in price, but also in terms of the benefits for dairy production in California. And so we continue to develop those markets.
Mr. Mental for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Kilby, my first question to you. If I understand your testimony correctly, you feel that the aluminum extrusion industry is being overlooked in the current discussions on trade matters. Is that correct?
Yes, that's why I'm here. I'm here to push our voice up and differentiate ourselves from the primary producers.
Excellent. Well, thank you for doing that here. We obviously make recommendations as this committee, taking into account your view that the government is not appropriately addressing your concerns. What would your recommendations be?
Yeah, our recommendation short term is to put up a trade barrier to keep metal coming from low-cost countries and some European countries into Canada so that we can bring forward a trade case. That would be an immediate ask. And secondly, trying to negotiate away the aluminum tariffs. Those would be the two key things.
Thank you. Mr. Sherman, question to you. In a similar vein, do you feel that the canola industry's concerns are being adequately addressed here in Ottawa?
Look, I think we are continuing to discuss with government what supports need to look like. Obviously, I mentioned before, and we've been public about it, that the announcement from September 5th did miss the mark. We are hopeful that we'll be able to address and right-size some of those announcements to better benefit the Canadian canola industry at a time where we need net new demand. So let's be very clear about that. Net new demand, particularly from a domestic biofuels industry. And we also need to make sure that we can compete on a level playing field when it comes to feedstocks for our own biofuel production here. There is an issue around imports of likely or possibly fraudulent used cooking oil that is displacing Canadian canola as a feedstock. And we think that they have an unfair advantage, and so we propose some measures to address that through regulation.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, my final question is to you. If I understood your testimony correct, you said your members produce about 75 to 80% of the light-duty vehicles produced in Canada. Is that correct?
Correct.
How much of that in percentage terms would be exported to the United States versus sold in Canada?
Approximately 90% would go to the United States.
90% would be exported to the United States. Given that, how do you feel of your competitive position, your members versus the Detroit Three in the current situation?
Well, it's a bit of a tale of two cities. I think our two members, manufacturing members, are still operating at full production. They've not instituted any layoffs. Obviously, the tariff situation is very challenging at the moment and will continue to be challenging as long as it goes on. And that's why we need to have resolution to the 232 tariffs as soon as possible.
So would it be fair to say that your Ontario plants would be disproportionately affected if there's no automotive deal in the next coming weeks or months?
Yes, I think that's fair to say.
And in any, we've heard rumors of deals and dates have gone by, as you've probably heard. We thought we were receiving a deal by the 21st of July, and then there was a September date, and it seems like these dates are passing us by. If there's some movement on autos, and if there are quotas involved, what would your view on that be? So quotas being a number of vehicles that could be exported to the United States versus a number of vehicles that could be imported into Canada from the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a situation that's contemplated under the automotive side letter under the Canada-USMCA agreement. So that provides for quotas going into the United States. So I think that's an option for sure that needs to be considered. And I think the other reality is that 40% of the vehicles that are sold in this country come from the United States. So that's the highest export jurisdiction for the U.S. auto. And I think that needs to be something that we keep at the forefront of our negotiations.
Thank you very much, Madame Lapointe.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Adam, you answered a question put to you by my colleague. What is the percentage of construction light-duty trucks that are sent to the U.S.? What is it for Mexico?
I don't have line of sight of that, but I could attempt to get that information for the committee and get it back to you.
Puis vous avez parlé principalement de Honda.
And you spoke mostly about Honda and Toyota. Are there other car makers? And if so, who are they?
So in Canada, we have 5 manufacturers: Honda, Toyota, General Motors, Chrysler, or Stellantis, and Ford. I represent the 2 Japanese manufacturers. My other member companies are the exclusive Canadian distributors of their brands in Canada. So BMW Canada, Hyundai Canada, Volkswagen Canada, so on and so forth. But we only have 5 manufacturers in Canada at the moment.
Mais en fait, oui, je savais qu'il y avait General Motors.
Yes, I knew that there was a General Motors, but I wanted to hear about Volkswagen. Thank you, though. Mr. Sherman, I do have a question for you. You spoke earlier about phytosanitary rules in agriculture. It seems that there was something that wasn't working out right.
And what we're trying to do in that space. CUSMA has been very good for us. It's actually a benchmark, and I think I referenced that. Like, this should be the benchmark for future trade negotiations and agreements as well. So the more ambitious we can be in that space, the better it is, particularly as we look at countries or regions like ASEAN, Philippines, and others. Having ambitious text, particularly as it relates to things like biotechnology, for example, is really important for us. So as we get into a place where now that we have a regulated pathway for plant breeding innovation here in Canada, we hope to see more gene-edited products coming to market in the not-too-distant future to help us both from a climatic perspective and make sure that our crops are heat and drought-resistant moving forward. But we need to make sure that we have ambitious text around biotech moving forward to be able to access those markets. And so we actually want to do more and raise that level of ambition. And just to speak to why that's so important. As folks may know, there was a case brought under dispute settlement by the United States. Canada joined as a third party against Mexico because they were proposing to ban the import of GM corn into Mexico. That is a very slippery slope, particularly for a crop like ours that's 98 and 99% GM. And so we were able to be successful in that case. So dispute settlement's important, but we had a very strong trade agreement and language in the SPS chapter that benefited Canadian farmers and Canadian exporters.
Merci beaucoup. J'ai une question pour vous, Monsieur Kilby.
I have a question for you, Mr. Kilby. Well, you said that there was a lot of things in aluminum that came in through Mexico, got into Canada and the United States. And with the Buy American Act, Do you think that was prevented in the U.S.? So should we have something similar here in Canada?
I think Canada's heading in that direction. I've heard some encouraging things from the government about sourcing in Canada. Definitely Buy America was a big issue for our industry. It's one of the reasons I located a facility in the United States. I make parts for Bombardier, Alstom, for instance, and they have a national business or international business, and so they're forced to source in the United States for Buy America. I make their parts. It's easy for me to make them in my U.S. factory for that. So, yes, those things have had an impact on our industry. The Buy America, Buy Canadian rule would be helpful for us to get our parts into military vehicles and other things that the government is contemplating right now, as opposed to buying the lowest cost source from, some low cost country.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to our witnesses. We feel really badly. We can hear the struggles that you're having, and I want you to know that everybody really and truly is trying to find solutions to all of this. So, best wishes. Thank you very much for being here, and we will probably all stay in touch. So, meeting adjourned.